All right, we've been talking through this monologue that Tucker Carlson did on his show about a week ago. 15-minute monologue. We'll post a link to it so you can listen for yourself. A lot of what he says, I sort of cringe at, as I do mostly when he speaks. But a lot of what he says, I think, is true. The problem is, I think he presents a really legitimate problem, but I think we don't see the conclusion the same way, he and I. The conclusion he comes to is that the problems in America, and he brings up everything from, drug problems to, single parents to families struggling economically, and says that the solution is the family. And that if the ruling class, as he calls it, the people with the most money who are elected to office, if they would recognize the value of marriage and the value of a traditional family and put rules and regulations in place to support that all would be well. And I disagree. First of all, I believe that there are rules and regulations in place that support the traditional two-parent family that Tucker Carlson is talking about. It's called it's called your taxes. You get an advantage if you are married. And you get an advantage if you have kids from a tax perspective. So that's already there. And we all know how well that works when it comes to buying homes, right? You get a tax advantage if you buy a house. So we all go out and buy a house. The problem is marriage is far more complicated than a financial transaction. So how do you incent people to stay married to each other? It's not that simple. And it also, to me, is missing the fact that the reason why marriage was so much more permanent in earlier times is because women, on the whole, did not have a choice. If you were married to an abusive man, or frankly just someone you didn't like, or someone who ignored you, or who wasn't good to your kids, you had to stay because you did not have financial choice. The idea of, first of all, divorce now this is a long time ago, of course, but in the 50s, perhaps in the early 60s, divorce was frowned upon in society. If you were divorced, you were tainted as a woman. And you couldn't support yourself and your kids. So now I think what's changed is women have a choice. Women have found their way into the work world now and can and do have successful careers. And so this idea that if people would just go back in time to when marriage was, valued, well, that's a false view of the past. People stayed married because they didn't have a choice. And I'm not saying all men in marriages were bad in the 50s. That's obviously not the case. But certainly there was an expectation that men would work. They would bring home the money. And when they got home, they would be served by their wives. Their wives' job was to serve them in the kitchen, in the bedroom, you name it.
That's where that phrase, the king of your own castle?
Right.
Well, they expected to be treated as such.
Correct.
Yeah.
By the queen / the servant.
Correct.
And so I think what's wrong with that is, look, I'm a supporter of people being married. I've been married. I want to be married again maybe someday, but maybe. But I think the point is the core, what should make up the core of modern America is not marriage. It's individual freedoms, rights, and opportunities. That as an individual human being, whether I'm short, tall, fat, thin, old, young, black, white, gay, straight, no matter what, I should have the same opportunity as my neighbor to achieve. I should have the same access to education. I should have the same access to services, to health care. That's what we need. And by the way, if I want to get married, I should have the ability to do so, regardless of who I am in that mix. So, if we focused more on individual opportunity and individual freedoms, and looked at where that is, not functioning well, that might actually get us to a better nation. If we looked at the rural parts of the country, which Tucker Carlson specifically brings up in his monologue. And we look at the families there where the men are out of work. Again, I don't know much about rural America. I haven't spent any time there. I'm telling you what Tucker Carlson said. But he says that there are many white men in particular who are out of work there. There are babies being born out of wedlock. There is drug abuse, et cetera, et cetera. So if we go there and we look at what is wrong, why aren't these men able to get jobs? Where does that come from? Where does it start? Is it a lack of access to education? Does it have to do with our farming communities and their production? And then if that's the case, follow that on through. How is that solved by our tax policies? How is that solved by our trade wars and our tariff policies? How do we improve the lives of people in those communities? Also, what other industries can they get into? Why are there only, opportunities to be in technology, for example, in the cities? You can do technology from anywhere. Maybe it's an infrastructure problem, right? Maybe part of the problem in rural America is they don't have access to the internet in the way that we do, right? So maybe you start to improve some of that. You bring education via the internet to people. You bring opportunity via the internet to people. I have people that are working for me right now via the internet in South Africa and in the UK. Why couldn't I just hire somebody in Iowa? Well, maybe it's because they don't have the right internet access to do it. So, I think you have to step outside the box, and you have to step outside of 1950, Tucker Carlson, and look at modern times and say, how do we solve the problems that are happening today? I don't want to be married for the sake of being married. I don't want to be married because it's going to make this a better country or because it's going to give some financial something to somebody. No. If I get married again, I want to do it because I'm madly in love. And this is a person I want to spend my time with. And frankly, whether they make more money or less money than me isn't really the point. The point is how they comport themselves, who they are, what their brain is about, how they see the world, how they want to participate in the world. This idea that women don't want to marry men that make less money than them is not about the women. It's about the men. Women want to marry a man who's confident, who knows who he is, who walks around with his chin up and his shoulders high and takes care of business, gets stuff done. If you love what you do and it only brings in $22,000 a year, but you're darn good at it and you love it and you're proud of yourself and you're happy and you're strong, great. Like, it's the men that have a problem. Trust me, I can tell you through my own career. There were times when I was not in media, when I was in technology, and I was making a lot of money. And I was single, and I would go on a date with somebody who made less money than me, and they were uncomfortable, not me. Talk to your women friends. All women will tell you men don't like strong women. Men don't like successful women because it makes them uncomfortable. It's not that we don't want them. It's the other way around. I think there's a crisis. If there's a crisis, okay, I shouldn't use the word crisis at this point or national emergency or any of that but I think if there's a problem here, it's not with the sanctity of marriage. It's with men knowing how to be men without being the king of their castle. What does it mean to be a man? And to me, it's about, again, it's about confidence and decisiveness and, and a good solid brain. It's not even, it used to be about muscle. It could still be about muscle. I'm not saying I don't like a six pack, but I'm just saying the point is not that. The point is you as a man, be your best self, and women are going to flock to that. And they're going to want to be married to that, regardless of the money around it. Yeah, there's gold diggers. Sure there are, of course. There's bad people and idiots in every, part of the country and every walk of life across each race and all of that, right? But I think, at a general level, it's really more a crisis of men knowing how to be men in this new world in which women have access to the same kind of power that the men do. And we shouldn't try to take that back. We shouldn't try to take back. And by the way, you can say the same thing about race, that white people don't necessarily know how to operate in a world where black people can get as much as they do, right? So you can say that among any community. Why do people who tout the value of marriage not want gay people to be married? Well, somehow it changes what they have. They don't really care what you're doing, but somehow it devalues what they have because they can't find the value in it by themselves. if you that don't look elsewhere. Find the value as a man in yourself. If you need value in your own marriage, find it in your marriage, not by keeping someone else from getting married, or telling someone who isn't married that they should get married. That doesn't make it good, bad, or otherwise. I should point out my own bias here. I'm just going to point it out because I feel like everyone knows this, but I don't know. I don't hang out with all of you every day. So I'll just say this to be clear as we wrap things up. I am the product of a single mother who got divorced from my father, who was, a rough character. She got divorced from him when I was very young, and I was raised very successfully by a single mom. I went to an Ivy League school. I have a good education. I've had a good career, and I was raised by a single mom. And in turn, I also ended up divorced, and I also raised a daughter who has a master's degree and is successfully living in the world. So that's my bias. It's not the same as Tucker Carlson's. I agree with some of what he said, but not all. That said, at the end of the day, we're closer than we think in terms of what we all want. And maybe if we could find some common ground there, we could actually start to bring the country back together.